Right, good evening, everybody. We are going on to 2 Samuel chapter 13. And last week we saw Ammon, the firstborn son of David, tricking Tamar into his trap where he raped her. And David was angry but did basically nothing about it. But her brother Absalom was really furious and ended up hating Amnon, the firstborn son. And so we ended up seeing that David did not address the waywardness of his children and their issues. And these would bear long shadows of consequences into the future. All right, so let's have somebody read for us, please, from 2 Samuel chapter 13. Please read from verse 23 to the end of the chapter, verse 39. Verse 23 to verse 39.
Okay, I read from verse 23. 2 years later, when Absalom sheep shearers were at Baal Hazar, near the border of Ephraim, he invited all the king's sons to come there. Absalom went to the king and said, "Your servant has had shearers come. Will the king and his official please join me?" "No, my son," the king replied. "All of us should not go. We would only be a burden to you." Although Absalom urged him, he still refused to go, but gave him his blessing. Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon come with us." The king asked him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom urged him, so he sent with him Amnon and the rest of the king's sons. Absalom ordered his men, "Listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, and I say to you, strike Amnon down, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Have not I given you this order? Be strong and brave." So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted their mules, and fled. Verse 30. While they were on their way, the report came to David, "Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one of them is left." The king stood up, tore his clothes, and lay down on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. But Jonadab, son of Shimeah, David's brother, said, "My lord should not think that they kill all the princes. Only Amnon is dead." This had been Absalom's express intention ever since the day Amnon raped his sister, Tamar. "My lord, the king should not be concerned about the report that all the king's sons are dead. Only Amnon is dead." Meanwhile, Absalom had fled. Now the man standing watch looked up and saw many people on the road west of him, coming down the side of the hill. The watchman went and told the king, "I see men in the direction of Horonaim on the side of the hill." Jonadab said to the king, "See, the king's sons are here. It has happened just as your servant said." Verse 36. As he finished speaking, the king's son came in, wailing loudly. The king too and all his servants wept very bitterly. Absalom fled and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. But King David mourned for his son every day. After Absalom fled and went to Geshur, he stayed there 3 years, and the spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom, for he was concerned concerning Amnon's death.
Thank you, Robert. All right, so we see that in this section, Absalom actually kills his eldest half-brother, and it's 2 years in the waiting. He waited for a celebration of sheep shearing, And remember, the sheep shearing was kind of a celebration that took place. Remember the Nabal's story and Abigail, right? That was also a sheep shearing kind of celebration event. And so this was when Absalom invited all the king's sons to go there. And he even told the king, invited the king and his officials to go, but the king said no. So Absalom then urged him to let the other sons go, and he expressly invited the brother Amnon, but the king was a little bit suspicious. Why should he go with you? And so Absalom had to do a little bit of persuasive work until the king said, okay, let's let Amnon go. So what we will see in this section of the story is unresolved issues. Unresolved issues. They can burrow deep into people's hearts, and they lay dormant. They stay there waiting till such a time when an event or some other trigger activates the feelings behind those unresolved issues. And then it opens an outlet for these issues to surface in future episodes. Imagine for 2 full years, Absalom kept his hatred. The last chapter, the last reading we had last week was he kept the hatred for his brother. And he waited 2 years for an opportunity to take revenge for his sister. And for people who have unresolved issues and emotions, revenge, or what they would justify themselves, justice, is never too late in coming. People who are angry, they think it's justice. Yeah. So meanwhile, life seems ordinary, normal, as it continues with the usual activities. So for this particular event, it was a turning point during a sheep shearing celebration where Absalom made the invitation, the father declined, and then it opened the door for him to request that the king finally acceded, okay, because he had possibly maybe an inkling of suspicion that he could not put a finger on. And so finally, the Absalom was able to persuade him to let him host Amnon in his plot to carry out a revenge. So Absalom told his men that when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, so he's a little bit out of control, right? He's a little bit drunk. Then when he gives the order to strike him and they should kill him. So we see that Absalom made his plans carefully, and he had to consider the outcome of killing the crown prince because Amnon was the firstborn son. And Absalom spoke of valor. He told the men to not be afraid, but be strong and brave. So he encouraged the men, just like Joshua 1 verse 9, God encouraged Joshua to be brave. And he's addressed as men, but he gave no assurance of what their fate would be. You see, he wants them to kill his brother, but he doesn't give assurance that he would protect them. So if they get caught, what happens? He doesn't promise anything as far as we can see here. And so the king, so Absalom's men did exactly as he told them. And then in the confusion of the killing and the escape, the chaos, the escape of all David's other sons, somehow the report got messed up. The garbled report to David came that all his sons had been killed. So all the confusion caused people to think that everybody had died, every one of the king's sons. And the king ended up mourning the loss of all his sons who had gone to Absalom's celebration because the fake news was distorted. Now you can see how, when something happens, people are just messing with news and telling all kinds of information that's not accurate. And that's something like COVID-19 like that lah. And anything that is not orderly, people will definitely come up with something distorted. And so the report came to David, and in his own family and personal capacity, we see David gave in to indulging his emotions of shock and grief. So this is a side of David that we see now because it's personal to him. If something had happened involving his men, even if he was grieved and shocked, he would start on a course of action to deal with the issues involved and implied. For example, we saw in chapter 10, verse 3 to 5, when Hanun humiliated his men, he was very calm the way he handled it. He told them to wait for their beards to grow before returning. And then also on another occasion, remember many years back at Ziklag, when he and his men returned to Ziklag, supposedly after being rejected by the king of Gath to not be involved in the fight against King Saul, they returned to find out that the Ziklag had been destroyed by the Amalekites, and all their wives, families, and properties had been taken away. And even though he himself was grieved, when his men talked about stoning him, he found strength in God, and he found a way to very calmly deal with the crisis and pray to God, asking for guidance. And God led him to go and find the Amalekites and recover all their families and properties. So David, when it involved his men, he rose up. He could be grieved and shocked, but he would come up with a course of action to deal with the issues. But here, when issues that arise are personal and emotional, for David, he just gave in to his emotions of grief and shock. And that's also what happens with us when we go through a crisis where the emotions are personal to us, the issues are personal to us. We tend to confuse the way we should work or do with the way we actually behave. Yeah, we tend to confuse the way we should work or do with the way we actually behave. Matters that concern family tend to be more difficult to be addressed objectively than when we're trying to address for a larger group of people who are not personally in our family and cause emotions to arise. And for us, the tendency is to allow the emotions to complicate how people view and handle the matters. You see, so it's a matter of emotions, understanding ourselves, seeing ourselves. And God's people need to be clear-minded rather than let personal, especially negative emotions, blindside the response when we handle the issues and the situations. And the godly response is to separate both emotions and issues and deal with both separately. All right, so emotions is a very big thing for us as people. Yeah, and then people will say, yeah, you talk only, easier said than done. And this is where the mentality of what is most important escapes us in our human nature and thinking and doing. When we say easier said than done to learning how to separate between emotions and issues, we're really saying that we are not going to take responsibility to handle them well. Yeah. So we cannot be the holy of being like God if that happens, because this is where the mentality on what is most important escapes us. Yeah. Mentality on what is most important escapes us in our human nature, thinking and doing. That's to say, we would rather respond with our human nature, natural way, than the holy way of being like God. Think about it, all right? It's important to separate between emotions and issues because emotions will naturally color the way we view the issues, and we cannot be objective. That's why, if you remember, David had to have Prophet Nathan come to him, not address his adultery directly, right? Adultery directly, but address him through a parable. Yeah, because why? It enabled David to see his own problem objectively without his personal emotions being interfering. Yeah, so we must learn to not let our personal emotions interfere when we're handling something that is important. Otherwise, we cannot be the holy of being like God, because we will let our emotions affect how we think and act. And we should really be thinking and acting differently from our human nature. And so with the next part we see is Jonadab, son of Shemiah, David's brother. So it was his nephew, said, "My lord should not think that they killed all the princes. Only Amnon is dead." And he can actually tell the king, this has been Absalom's expressed intention ever since the day that Amnon raped his sister Tamar. And he says, "My lord, the king should not be concerned about the report that all the king's sons are dead. Only only Amnon is dead." So from this speech, we see that Jonadab was actually in Absalom's confidence. Absalom confided in Jonadab his hatred and his intention. See, it says expressed intention. Absalom has actually told Jonadab that he intended to kill Amnon. And he was even able to say, only one king's son has died, and that is Amnon. Which is to say that Jonadab all along, he knew this plan and he was silent about it. In that sense, he knew about an intended murder. He knew about an intended murder, and he actually kept quiet about it. And so that was terrible, because he knew somebody was going to kill another person, and yet he did not do anything to try to stop the person, dissuade the person, or prevent a murder from taking place. So he knew a tragedy was going to happen, but he did nothing about it. All right, so we see Jonadab here with characteristic shrewdness, right? In verse 3, the Bible already said that he was a very shrewd person. Yes, and he put the situation straight. With all the fake news running around, he could tell the king the truth. It was not as bad as David thought. Only one son was dead, and Absalom had confided in Jonadab his intention for revenge. Absalom had harbored it for these 2 years, and he acted like Cain. Absalom acted like Cain all the way back in Genesis 4. What did he do? Harboring anger and murder in his heart. Yeah, just like Jesus says, if you're angry in your heart, that is practically equal to murder. And this is another case. This is another case besides Cain. Because Absalom, like Cain, he brooded. He harbored anger and murder. He brooded, he nursed, and he planned. All these things take time. And you see, in the 2 years, the time did not lessen the pain or the hatred. In fact, it got more intense. So time does not heal everything, especially emotions. time does not heal all the negative emotions. Right? So as God's people, we need to recognize that if we have negative emotions, and especially against somebody else, we need to address them and resolve them, rather than let the negative emotions continue to eat into us and then lead us to do wrong actions in the future. Already harboring, brooding is a sin. Yeah, harboring all this is already a sin because it leads to bitterness, and bitterness comes with resentment and finally hatred. So Absalom was like Cain, keeping all these things in his heart long enough to carry out the action instead of resolving the emotions and issues in his heart. And we see there was no place for forgiveness or anything else to resolve the hatred that he filled his heart with. Let us not keep negative emotions. Let us not keep negative emotions inside us and let them and give Satan in our emotions, lives, and relationships. You can see that in Ephesians 4:26-27. Can somebody help us to turn to Ephesians 4? Read for us verse 26 and 27.
Ephesians 4:26, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil.
Thank you. All right, so that let us not sin by holding on to anger. Yeah, let us not sin by holding on to anger. And so Absalom held on to anger, and it has led him finally to the act of murder. Yes, that's what happens. We murder people in our thoughts, and it comes out in actions. We may not all have the courage to actually kill a person physically, but already in our hearts we have killed somebody. Now, Jonadab as cousin, friend, and confidant. Three things. He's cousin because their fathers are brothers. He's a friend and he's a confidant. He was a good listener, but not someone who could help a bitter Absalom to get over his issues that made him plan to sin. So Jonadab, while he could listen, he could not help and he could not get Absalom to resolve his inner issues. Jonadab was shrewd and resourceful with ideas, but he lacked the morals, he lacked the desire and the skills to help his cousins. And we see that actually Amnon already confided in him and he gave him a bad plan. Yeah? He actually told Amnon how to get to sleep with Tamar. And then he has actually listened to Absalom planning to kill Amnon. So this Jonadab really was a really shrewd person. And the fact that, he has easy access to the king. And look at the situation that the king was mourning, the news came to the king and he was mourning the death of all his sons, and yet Jonadab was there. Jonadab could tell the king, don't cry, it's only one son, it's not all your sons. So his shrewdness somehow brought him into the king's presence. And in the king's presence, he was able to reveal the truth and correct the fake news, right? So we see that he was shrewd, he was resourceful, and he could win people's confidence. But he could not help, and he did not help people to resolve their issues and their struggles. Now, God's people can be people who think they are good and helpful people, but they do not truly embrace and work out the concept of godliness in their personal lives and relationships. You know, so Jonadab could be like a Christian who thinks that he's being helpful and he's being good to listen, and yet he carries on letting these people keep and hold on to all their negativity. Yes, and all their terrible plans. Yeah. So in basic attitude, this group of people are still like the people in the society around. So if he is one of God's people, or if he's a Christian, he's no different from the world. No different from the society, because he basically endorses revenge and all the negativity that God's people should not hang on to. And he listened and he just let people hang on to all their sinful attitudes. So meanwhile, we see in verse 34, what happens is Absalom had fled, because after killing the brother, he has to run for his life. Okay, and the man standing watch looked up and saw many people on the road west of him coming down the side of the hill. And the watchman told the king, I see men. And Jonadab said to the king, there, you see, the king's sons are here, just exactly as I told you. So here Jonadab is acting smart, acting like he knows everything, which yes, he does, but he did not do the right thing still. So we see that in verse 34, Absalom fled is repeated. Absalom fled. Okay, it's repeated in verse 37 and also in verse 38. So the idea is he disappeared. He sought refuge at the little principality of Geshur in Transjordan, that means over the other side of the Jordan River, where his maternal grandfather Talmai ruled. We saw that in chapter 3, verse 3 already. And it was a place where he could be sure to have some form of protection and empathy. Empathy because it was his mother's, can I say the Chinese, 娘家, the mother's household, you know, the household of his mother. Yeah, where his mother originally came from. So from there, he would get some protection and empathy, despite his crime of killing his brother and crown prince. Because the crown prince brother was not from his mother's family, so they would not be so upset. That's the way of the world. Now, when the people that the watchman spotted arrived, Jonadab was able to respectfully confirm and assure the king that his sons were safe, right? Respectfully, because he refers to himself as your servant. Yeah, so he was still respectful to the king, although he did not help the king's sons to get over their problems. So when he finished speaking, the sons really arrived, all crying away. So everybody started a cry party. Hi, would you like to join the cry party? Right? So all of them broke down in trauma and shock over what had happened and what they had witnessed. It's very traumatizing, yeah? It is not easy to get over being a witness to murder right in front of our eyes. Can you imagine if somebody right in front of you kills your brother? Yeah, you would really be traumatized. It is even more terrible if or when both the murderer and the victim are family members. And what more, if the witnesses are also family members. You see, it's a whole, everybody is in the same family, and here you have a family member killing another family member. And the people watching are also family members. So imagine the grief for the father. Yeah, it would be tremendous. And yet here you see the Bible refers to the father as the king, not as David. not in his personal capacity, but in his role as the king. So what should the king do? Because that means all these people are his subjects. And we also do know that often the sons hold important positions in the court. Yeah, the king's sons often hold important positions in the court. So how should fathers handle the fights and strife of their sons? How should fathers who are kings handle the fights and strife of their sons? David's family arrived at this situation because he did not nip the problem in the bud 2 years earlier. Yeah, he did not nip the problem in the bud 2 years earlier, when his eldest son did a grievous wrong to his daughter, and the two of them were half siblings. And we see relationship problems can and often have a very long shadow in the life of people, especially when they are family. Yeah, relationship problems can and often have a very long shadow in the life of people, especially family. And you know, it also happens in the church. The church is also a big family of God's children. And within the church, relationship problems can and often have a very long shadow of family members in the church of God. And here is an instance of how parental love without discipline can lead to tragedy. Parental love without discipline can lead to tragedy. Okay, so this is something that can happen among God's people, can happen in God's family. And so in verse 37, we see that Absalom fled and he went to his mother's home, where the mother came from. And then we have a very heart-wrenching statement, but King David mourned for his son every day. Mourned for his son every day. How much he loved the son, how much he missed the son, right? And we see his great love for his children. The affection he had for all his sons was able to let him overlook very serious faults. Yeah, he loved them so much that he just could not deal with their serious faults. He mourned for his missing prodigal son who had done things to hurt his father and family and then left like that. Yes, so we see that David, when it came to personal issues and personal emotions, he just could not handle it. Yeah. And when Absalom fled, he stayed there for 3 years. So 3 years of exile. And the Bible says the spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom. He mourned for the son every day. He longed to go to his son, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. So it looks like King David got over the death of his children in a sense, quite easily, even though he loved them. Remember the first baby with Bathsheba? He was able to get over that baby. And now, with much grieving and pain, he was able to get over Amnon. But he could not get over Absalom because Absalom was still alive. Yeah. So in one sense, we see that David was a practical man. Yeah. He was a practical man in a situation that stares him in the face. That's to say, if there's nothing he can do about it, he will be practical about it. Okay, that's a situation, something practical. Just as he could get over the death of the first baby, but with Bathsheba, he was now able to get over Amnon's death, and still he struggled in his love for the alive son, Absalom. He missed Absalom so much that his spirit longed to go to Absalom. But he could live, you know, he could live with the physical state of affairs just helplessly and make do lah. But he could not deal with the internal emotions and issues in relationships. So it's like one of those garang, you know, those very brave and tough heroes in situations where you require bravery and courage and loyalty. Wow, very good. But where it touched the heart of personal emotions and family members, just cannot handle. Just cannot handle. People can distract themselves with external activities, but they cannot run away or distract themselves from the inner working of their thoughts and emotions. See, can distract with externals. People can distract themselves with external, but they cannot distract inner working of thoughts and emotions. So that is really, really difficult for people. So what about yourself? Are you able to distract yourself with external things, but inside you, you're just being disturbed in your thoughts and your emotions? Cannot find surrender. Cannot find surrender and cannot find peace when things are disturbing us. All right? How do we offer salt and light solution to the world if we cannot address, you know, ourselves and our problems? So let's see what happens in chapter 14. We end chapter 13 with David's struggle. Yes. And so in chapter 14, we will find a development spearheaded by Joab. Can somebody help us to read chapter 14, verse 1 to 17?
Second Samuel, chapter 17, verse 1 to 17. Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, "Pretend you are in mourning, dress in mourning clothes, and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. Then go to the king and speak these words to him." And Joab put the words in her mouth. When the woman from Tekoa went to the king, she fell with her face to the ground to pay him honor. And she said, "Help me, your majesty." The king asked her, "What is troubling you?" She said, "I'm a widow. My husband is dead. I, your servant, had 2 sons. They got into a fight with each other in the field, and no one was there to separate them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant. They say, 'Hand over the one who struck his brother down, so that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed. Then we will get rid of the heir as well.' They will put out the only burning coal I have left, leaving my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth." The king said to the woman, "Go home. I will issue an order in your behalf." But the woman from Tekoa said to him, "Let my lord the king pardon me and my family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt." The king replied, "If anyone says anything to you, bring them to me, and they will not bother you again." She said, "Then let the king invoke the Lord his God to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction, so that my son will not be destroyed. As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground." Then the woman said, "Let the servant speak a word to my lord the king." Speak, he replied. The woman said, why then have you devised a thing like this against the people of God? When the king says this, does he not convict himself? For the king has not brought back his banished son, like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered. So we must die. But that is not what God desires. Rather, he devises ways so that a banished person does not remain banished from him. And now I have come to say this to my lord, the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, I will speak to the king. Perhaps he will grant his servant's request. Perhaps the king will agree to deliver his servant from the hand of the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from God's inheritance. And now your servant says, may the word of my lord the king secure my inheritance. For my lord the king is like an angel of God in discerning good and evil. May the Lord your God be with you.
Thank you, Jack. All right, so down here, this whole chapter is taken up with the delicate matter of Absalom's return and reconciliation with the father. All right, and so we see it starts off the chapter with Joab, the commander of the army, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So that links us back to the previous chapter where we see that the spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom. And so Joab knew about it, and Joab did something about it. He did not just sit there and do nothing. And so he engaged this wise woman and got her to pretend that she's mourning, right? So to act a part, like somebody who has spent many days grieving for somebody dead. And then once she is in that mode, right? She's in that role, then she goes to see the king and talk to him. And we see the verse 3, it says, Joab put the words in her mouth. So he advised her and told her what to say. So Joab, we see that he was an official close to the king. And he was able to see the king's obvious longing for the son Absalom. And he could sense that David was ready for reconciliation with his wayward son. And so he took an indirect approach to nudge the king to take action because the king is doing nothing. So how to get the king to do? Chances are Joab could have talked to the king himself, but the king did not budge because Joab is too close to the king. Yeah, anyway, Joab was just the king's nephew, right? So he engaged this woman's service to play the part of a woman widow whose clan members were threatening to kill her remaining son. And she was to approach the king with this problem and find the king's help. And this strategy is actually similar to Nathan's parable in chapter 12. You see, David, once again, he needs somebody to nudge him with a parable so that his personal emotions will not get in the way. Yeah, I say again, David needs somebody to nudge him in the right direction so that his personal emotions will not get in the way. So the crucial point is that David is the judge in the land. Okay, David is the judge in the land and he has to give his ruling, and the surprise will come for him to discover that when he passed judgment on a case, that judgment bounces back on himself. Okay, the judgment connects personally to himself. And so that is 2 times David needed somebody to come and tell him. What about us? What about us? How many times do we need somebody to come and tell us? The difficulty is, we normally approach people directly, and we are not so good at coming up with all the wonderful parables or allegories that are so close. Yeah, so that's why we have difficulty to share with people when we want to address their sin or want to address their wrong. And then we get punched in the face when people say, who are you to judge me? You know, we talk about people judging. But here, the wisdom here is David judged himself. Yeah, the wisdom here is David judged himself. And the intelligence behind that is actually through a story where he did not see himself until it comes when he passes judgment, and then it is revealed that his judgment is actually judging himself. So the woman came to the king, and then he paid him honor and asked him for the help. And the king asked, what's troubling you? Now we see that in David's reign, it was actually possible for the ordinary citizen to receive a hearing from the king. So that is actually a good thing, because it's kind of like an open door concept for justice. Kind of like the highest court available in the land is not just the high court, but it is actually the king himself. Why? Because the king can make decisions and overrule decisions. And so we see that David made himself available to judge and help his citizens with their troubles. Particularly, we see that these are cases where his magistrates and officers were not able to come up with a solution. You know, like the time of Moses, his father-in-law advised him to appoint judges of different sized group of people, and then those cases that were very difficult, they should refer to Moses. So Moses did not have to sit and listen to 100% of the cases, just the hard cases. And so this is probably the situation with David as well, where his magistrates and officers would let these citizens come to him for a solution when they needed his higher authority to make a decision. And so probably Joab could have been involved in that sense of channeling her to the king. And so she started the story. She said, I'm a widow, my husband is dead, and I, your servant, had 2 sons. And the 2 sons got into a fight with each other when there was nobody to separate them. And that was when one killed the other because he lost control. And now the whole clan, all the family members, the relatives, they all have risen up against your servant. Come up to the woman, the mother of the surviving brother, and said, hand over the one who killed his brother so that we can put him to death for killing his brother. And then you see the terrible thing, then we will get rid of the heir as well. So here, they are not just trying to seek justice, they are trying to get rid of the heir. That means what? When they are trying to impose justice, they do it for a personal motive. They hope to gain something out of it. Isn't that terrible? When people act like they are being just, they are motivated by the benefits they can get out of that. So that is not justice. We can't see the hearts, but in this case, we are told. And so the woman lamented, they would put out the only burning coal I have. You know, the Chinese say the only lantern, or the only candle that passes on the lineage of light from one family generation to another. Yeah, they'll get rid of the burning coal, the light that passes from one generation to another. So they want to kill my only son left, who can leave descendants behind, that will leave my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth. So basically it would just destroy the family. So the woman told King David her story. I use inverted commas because this was something specially prepared for David. Her clan members were intent on putting to death the brother, and they did not care about the drastic effect this would carry. The result is actually they would get rid of the heir. So now we find a clash of duties here, right? A clash of duties. One is the duty to avenge the first brother's death, and then the other one is to preserve the name and property of the widow's late husband. Imagine, there are only two sons, one killed the other one. If you avenge the first brother, it means the second one dies. If the second one also dies, then how to preserve the family, property, right? Because now both sons will be dead. There's no continuity for the husband's family. And so we see that this situation was like a dog chasing its own tail. It just goes round and round. But the thing is, for those who are looking to benefit, it gets rid of the whole family on this widow's husband's family. No, the levirate marriage, that is a type of marriage where the brother of a dead man is to marry the brother's widow to preserve the family line and the land inside the family. Remember, that is the story of Ruth, basically. Yeah. So the levirate marriage was designed to resolve this latter kind of situation, protecting the name and property of the late husband. So that was supposed to resolve this latter situation. And we can find the details in Deuteronomy 25, 5 to 10. Okay, now verse 7. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant. This verse here may provide a clue to why David did not heal the breach with Absalom despite his strong fatherly emotions. Because when the woman said the whole clan has risen up against your servant, in the background that we are not told in the Bible, it could very well be the other members of the royal family, particularly the remaining sons of David, may have been agitating for the law to be implemented as soon as Absalom returned to Israel. That is to say, all the rest of the royal family could have been waiting for Absalom to come, and then they would pressurize David to execute him. Okay, so if that is the case, we would understand why David loved the son so much, longed for the son and longed to go to the son, but he did nothing. He did nothing, even though he loved and he missed the son. Okay, because all the other clan members of the royal family were pressurizing him. So the king, and furthermore, you said, then we will get rid of the heir as well. That's an interesting thing, because in terms of who is the first son to be crown prince after Amnon was actually another brother, and then the third one was Absalom. But as far as the second brother is concerned, and Absalom was the third brother, as long as the second brother is concerned, the Bible only mentioned him once, and after that he disappeared from the Bible. Okay, so it looks like there was no possibility that the second son of David could be the crown prince. And so the next in line was actually Absalom. And that's why the story of this woman was very carefully crafted for David, that these clan members of the woman were actually trying to get rid of the heir as well when they wanted justice. All right, so we can see the complication that was possible in this particular story at this time. Complication of other people wanting to get rid of Absalom so that he would not be the crown prince and succeed David as the king. So that is a possible complication. But of course, the king did not know this because this is the woman's story. He did not know it was his story, right? He did not know it was a story. So the king told the woman, go home, I will settle the matter for you. Now that's very easy, right? For the woman, if the king says, I will settle the matter for you. But then if he settles the matter for her, the thing is he still has not settled his matter, right? Her issue was to get David to make a commitment to see himself and do something about his own situation with Absalom. So for the king to just say, go home, I will settle the matter for you, the woman has not finished her mission from Joab. Yeah, she has to continue. So the woman said to him, my lord the king, let the blame rest on me and on my father's family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt. She wants to carry on. She has not finished because she has not achieved her objective, her real objective. So when the king agreed to intervene on behalf of the endangered son of this woman, right, he did not specify exactly how he would solve her problem. And so the woman then expressed her willingness to shoulder any blame that might be incurred as a result of the king's intervention. So the family members might blame her for getting the king involved in their fight. Okay, so she says she was willing to bear responsibility for what happened for the sake of her son and family, and she wanted to get a clear and binding promise from him before she could be assured her problem would be surely resolved. In other words, the issue that she really wanted to resolve was David's. And at this point, it was still not resolved, even though the king made a commitment to help her. So the king replied, if anyone says anything to you, then you tell them to come and see me, and I will make sure they will not trouble you anymore with the problem. That's good, but still not solve the problem, right? So she carried on. Then let the king invoke the Lord his God to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction so that my son may not be destroyed. So now she wants to press the king for a firm commitment. How does she do it? She wanted him to invoke God's name. No? Invoke the Lord his God. That means you kind of like have to swear lah. You know, like somebody goes to court now, and then they put their hand on the Bible and they swear to tell the truth and hold true, nothing but the truth, right? So in that sense, she wants him to make that kind of commitment that the son would not be destroyed. So he gave her the assurance surely as the Lord lives. So this is him making can I say the sumpah, the oath, the agreement, using the Lord's name. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground. So he gave her this assurance as she requested, using God's name. So that means he will definitely intervene, right? That nothing would happen to him and the son would save. And this was what she was waiting for. She was waiting for this statement. So the woman said, let your servant speak a word to my lord the king. And he said, speak. So he gave her permission, and now she is ready to uncover the truth that her story actually had a second layer. The second layer is the true thing that she's here for, and this second layer is David himself. So the king said, the woman said, why then have you devised a thing like this against the people of God? So she now turns the story around and says, do you know, king, that you are the one at fault? The one I'm talking about at fault is you. When the king says this, does he not convict himself? You see, you are now passing judgment, passing statement is on yourself. For the king has not brought back his banished son. Like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered, so we must die. But God does not take away life. Instead, God devises ways so that a banished person may not remain banished from him. So he's saying that God will not banish a person and stay with that. God will not be satisfied. Remember the parable of the Good Shepherd? Jesus told the parable of the Good Shepherd. That is Jesus himself, God going to look for the banished son, the lost sheep. And so in verse 15, she says, and now I've come to say this to my Lord the King, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought I will speak to the king. Perhaps he will do what the servant asks. And the king will agree to deliver his servant from the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from the inheritance God gave us. And now your servant says, may the word of my Lord the king bring me rest. So I want you to give me assurance and comfort. And then she flatters him a little bit. You know, she tries to butter him up so that he will feel good. Because she has just told him it is his fault about something he should have done but did not do. So now she butters him up. She says, for the Lord the king, my Lord the king is like an angel of God in discerning good and evil. The king can tell right from wrong. May the Lord your God be with you. So she's kind of like trying to soften the blow for him and protect herself in case he gets angry with her. Okay, so you see she's trying to soften the blow. Okay, so what can we learn? All right, let's see what we can learn from here, the significance. And so the woman has got his promise and she came out with the real meaning and purpose, the real meaning and purpose of her acted parable. With the king's permission, she said, let your servant speak a word to my lord the king. Okay, with the king's permission, he said, speak. She now confronted him with his willingness to do for her what he did not do for God's people. See, the picture is often bigger than we realize. When we don't do the right thing, the picture affects not just this immediate person, okay? It actually involves and affects a bigger circle of people than we realize. It's a little bit like, you know, a stone that you drop into the water. Yeah, you drop a stone into the water, what happens? There is the ripple effect, right, of many outer circles forming. Many outer circles forming because there is this shock wave impact of the stone hitting the water. The shock wave actually ripples the force of the hitting the water with the stone. It causes the force to ripple outward in circles, in widening circles. So this is the problem when we sin and do not realize that sin has actually got this effect. When we don't do the right thing, it has ripple shock effects that go out in widening circles. So she's saying that what you are doing is actually affecting God's people. And she's saying he was willing to ensure that her son would not die. You see, she is just a nobody. Yes, she is fighting for her husband's son and ancestry, but she's still a nobody compared to David. Why did he not act to bring back his own banished son, Absalom, and protect him so that he would not die? If he was willing to save her son, the son of an ordinary citizen, he should do it not so much for himself as for the nation. You see, you don't do it for yourself, you do it for the nation. Death is unavoidable. Okay, so she says here, like water spilled on the ground which cannot be recovered. So we must die. Once you spill water on the ground, you cannot take back. That is to say, we all have to die sooner or later. Okay? And we don't return. Once we die, we don't return. But God does not take away life in his disciplinary actions because he is merciful, and he wants the banished sinner to be reconciled to him. Godly fathers, mentors, trainers need to act like God in loving discipline and not to banish their children and trainees. I use the word banish that some of your later translations use. Okay, should not banish or alienate their sons, their children, their trainees, and so on. Now, we seem to be able to see and help others with their problems, but unable to see and help ourselves with our own problems. Isn't that so true? Psychiatrists, psychologists, they all can help other people, but when it comes to their own family, they can't help themselves. Isn't it sad? All the skills and everything that they train and they can use to help other people, they cannot use to help their own self. Why? Because emotions, and our perceptions, when we are stuck in that kind of situation, we seem to trap ourselves and we don't get out of it. We seem to see but unable to help ourselves, see other people's problems but not help our own problems. When we are too deeply involved because of our own emotions and sentiments, we become blindsided. Blind spot, the blind spot of our own personal involvement. And this is one reason we need friends and confidants. People who are not caught in the circle or the trap, the circular trap where we go round and round and round in circles. Yeah, we need friends and confidants who are not caught in the cyclic trap that we are in. Perhaps Joab was too close to David for David to listen to him. The matter could also be too close and emotional to David for him to be objective with anything Joab might say directly, or he probably did talk to David about. So Joab engaged this wise woman to speak to David about his problem with her parable, so that it would enable him to discern more objectively the good and evil in his situation. Right? So this is where she flatters him that, okay, I hope that now the king is able to discern good and evil. I talked to you about it through a parable. I hope you can see the situation yourself now. Yeah? So she flatters him, of course, hopes that he knows what she's really saying about his situation. As for us, we certainly need God to be with us to work out our personal emotions and issues. But we need human sounding boards. Okay? We need human sounding boards because God helps us through, God helps us with the strength and wisdom and all that sort of stuff, but God is invisible at the end of the day, and we need visible human sounding boards. Visible, tangible, human sounding boards to look us in the face. We need somebody that we can see face to face and dash the cold light of truth into our face. Yeah, because God is invisible, we can err, we can dodge, we can dodge by not hearing God, not wanting to hear God, being deaf to God. We can dodge because God is invisible and intangible. But when we have a human sounding board, we cannot dodge. The person is there, you see. And if we don't want to have a person, then we are actually blindsiding ourselves again. So we need some tangible human being. Look us in the face, dash the cold light like water of truth into our face, so that we can be awakened to see the truth on what needs to be perceived and done. What do we need to see? What do we need to understand? We need to see and understand. Okay, what needs to be perceived and then done? Because if there's no human being to confront us, of course everybody says must confront with love, but you know, whether a person comes with love or not, we feel that we are being judged, because there's the pain of truth that hurts. Yeah, truth hurts, and we feel the pain, and that's why we say people are not loving. It's not that people are not loving, we are just not prepared to face the pain. Yeah, we're just not prepared to face the pain. How much are we prepared to face the emotional pain? You know, a lot of us have high threshold for physical pain, but we can be cowards. We can be fearful when it comes to emotional pain. We rather avoid, we rather hide, or we rather bury it. But there's only so much we can hide, because then it will have consequences. Just like some of the people we have seen, okay, with their pain, like Absalom, he had all this pain of looking at his sister so tortured for her life. Yes, and he could not do anything about that. So otherwise, you know, we need to be awakened to see the truth on what needs to be perceived and done. Otherwise, we can be too deaf to God's voice or too stuck in our own thinking and feeling to tell that we are not doing what God would want. You know, too stuck in our own thinking and feeling to tell that we are not doing what God would want. That is something that happens a lot even with Christians. We may ignore or we may tune out God's voice and word, but we cannot treat an audible human voice as nothing unless we choose to continue to ignore our problem and deceive ourselves. Okay, even with a human aid. So let's see what happens in verse 18 onwards. Can somebody read for us verse 18 to 33?
Verse 18. I must know one thing, the king replied, and tell me the truth. Yes, my lord the king, she responded. Did Joab put you up to this? And the woman replied, my lord the king, how can I deny it? Nobody can hide anything from you. Yes, Joab sent me and told me what to say. He did it to place the matter before you in a different light. But you are as wise as an angel of God, and you understand everything that happens among us. So the king sent for Joab and told him, all right, go and bring back the young man Absalom. Joab bowed with his face to the ground in deep respect and said, at last I know that I have gained your approval, my lord the king, for you have granted me this request. Then Joab went to Jeshua and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king gave this order, Absalom may go to his own house, but he must never come into my presence. So Absalom did not see the king. Verse 25. Now Absalom was praised as the most handsome man in all Israel. He was flawless from head to foot. He cut his hair only once a year, and then only because it was so heavy. When he weighed it down, it came to 5 pounds. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter. His daughter name was Tamar, and she was very beautiful. Absalom lived in Jerusalem for 2 years, but he never got to see the king. Until verse 28, right? Is it until verse
All the way
28?
to the end.
Oh, to the end, okay. 29. Then Absalom went for Joab to ask him to intercede for him. But Joab refused to come. Absalom sent for him a second time. But again, Joab refused to come. So Absalom said to his servants, "Go and set fire to Joab's barley field, the field next to mine." So they set his field on fire, as Absalom had commanded. Then Joab came to Absalom at his house and demanded, "Why did your servant set my field on fire?" And Absalom replied, "Because I wanted you to ask the king why he brought me back from Joshua if he didn't intend to see me. I might as well have stayed there. Let me see the king. If he finds me guilty of anything, then let him kill me." So Joab told the king what Absalom had said. Then at last, David summoned Absalom, who came and bowed low before the king, and the king kissed him.
Thank you. Right. So the king told the woman, now he suspected he smelled a fish already. Yeah, after all this talk, the way the woman talked, he knows, oh, this sounds very familiar. Sounds like somebody who has been talking to me like that. So she said, answer me truthfully. And she made the woman confess. She made the confess. So light dawned on the king on 2 points. Okay, the first important thing is what he should do about his own situation. At the same time, the second point is he also realized that the woman did not come on her own. She had been given the mission to speak to him about his problem with her parable. And that's where you see once again the value of a parable that's able to simulate the problem scenario so closely that he actually sees himself inside it. So the king confirmed that Joab was actually behind this whole setup and what the woman was trying to establish. And she confessed to him, Joab had sent her to change the present situation. And Mac's version said, bring a different perspective, right? Bring a different perspective so that you will see differently from the trap that you are in. Yeah, so see a different angle or perspective from the trap that you put yourself in. Can I use it my own rephrase? Yeah, see the different angle or perspective from the trap that you put yourself in. Because the truth is very often we ourselves set us up in the wrong way of thinking and looking at things. And that's why we cannot solve problems. That's why we stay in conflicts, problems that should actually not matter. Yeah, problems and situations that should not matter, should let go. So perhaps Joab, let's talk a little bit about Joab, okay? Because we saw a little bit of commitment, of loyalty, we saw a little bit of rashness, but let's see a little bit about his way of looking at things. Perhaps Joab was concerned about the possibility that David might die while Absalom was still in exile, leaving Israel in political chaos. You see, Joab could have been thinking of the bigger picture of the nation. If so, the woman's words may suggest that God was sparing David's life. Remember just now that the water spilled on the ground cannot be recovered. If a bad situation happens, you cannot reverse it. Water spills on the ground is a bad situation. You cannot take it back. So the bad situation could be David died, and then chaos resulted because there was no clear-cut crown prince identified. No clear-cut crown prince identified. If so, the woman's words may suggest that God was sparing David's life long enough for him to bring Absalom back. I remember I said Absalom was the third son. Yes, after Amnon, the second prince was never mentioned again, so something must have happened to him, and Absalom was actually the third in line to be king. If so, the woman's words, I read that, Joab was clearly loyal to certain values. Whether for David's sake, for Absalom, for both, or for the interests of the nation, he acted based on what he believed to be important. The king was being ineffective and inactive about his son. Actually not wise like the woman flattered in verse 20 just now, that my Lord has wisdom like that of an angel of God. Yeah. If Absalom was to be the successor to David's throne, then he must be brought back. And like Prophet Nathan, her story carried a moral. What's the lesson? The welfare of the family is more important than distancing the sinner, with or without punishment. Isn't that true? Fathers and mothers, yeah. The welfare of your family is more important than your sinning son or daughter who makes a serious mistake, right? And then you just keep away from your son or your daughter. With or without punishment, you keep away. The welfare of the family is more important, okay? Deal with the issue, deal with the child, but don't alienate your child. So in verse 14, you see that God devises ways so that a banished person might not remain banished from him. So God doesn't want alienation or distancing to remain even with him, and therefore even within family members, whether biological family or the Church of God family members. David accepted her moral, and applying this principle, she drew a parallel that the welfare of the whole nation was more important than the punishment of Absalom, where you distance him. You just distance him and ignore him where he is. Who could be the next in line for crown prince? Therefore, Absalom should be recalled from exile. Okay, so this other information I've talked about, Absalom was actually next in line to be the king. So in verse 22, when David told Joab to bring back the young man Absalom, Joab was of course very happy and thankful that David responded as he planned. He had actually got a good intention, an important intention. And so Joab represents a group of God's people who are loyal to certain ideals and will act according to them, even if they may not be God's ideals. Let me say that again. Joab represents the group of God's people who are loyal to certain ideals. They have certain thinking that is, to them, is very important, right? That's the way to be, that's the way to do, that's the way to carry on. And they will act according to these, even if they are not congruent with God's ideals. So here we see something good, but may not be all that godly. Okay, in this particular case, not totally wrong, right? He's not sinning here, but in his general life decisions, we see that he has very strong and loyal ideals to certain things. Whether they are right or wrong, he will just carry on. Yeah. So the lesson we can see is people grow up with values and attitudes that are so ingrained, they may not realize some of them are not compatible with God's purposes and values. Okay? So when people become Christians, their values and attitudes before being Christian are so ingrained. When they become Christians, they merge their values with God's values and purposes. So there is actually a conflict and an inconsistency. And that's something I suspect which is very common, more common than we realize among us Christians. Okay, so it'll be good if we can actually do some soul searching very honestly, and also, like I said just now, confidence. We need people to help us see, not like just now that brother, you know, not like Jonadab. Jonadab was not a very good confidant. He saw the problem, but he didn't help. He just carried on letting people have the problem. Yeah, he let his two cousins carry on in their wrong. And they, perhaps we, continue to do as they have always valued, thought, and prioritized. Example, Joab's loyalty and commitment to family caused him to seek vengeance to kill Abner. You know, his loyalty was there, but it jeopardized the bigger picture of David's becoming king of the united Israel. Yeah, so that was his sense of loyalty and ideal, vengeance, without taking into consideration how it jeopardized a bigger picture. And then his loyal obedience to David to have Uriah killed in battle. Uriah killed in battle when David asked him to do this wrong thing. And then we will see him making good and bad decisions as well in future events based on his loyal ideals. Then Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem, and the king refused to see him. So Joab brought Absalom back, and David continued to alienate him. He refused to restore Absalom to his position at court. He loved his son, but he did not know how to show it. Once again, David did not think about the impact of his choice and action on his own son. He did not punish Amnon for his son, for his rape of Tamar, or deal decisively with Absalom's murder of Amnon. Now he finally allowed Absalom back. He did not speak to him for 2 whole years. That means he never saw the son for 5 years. Can you beat that? 5 years. 3 physically away, and 2 right in the same palace area. Such indecisive action would become David's undoing. See, sin in itself brings pain to its victims. It is painful to address sin of loved ones. All right? So David experienced the pain of the sin of his sons. Yeah, he was also one of the victims because his own daughter, his own son were killed. And it is painful to address sin of loved ones, his own children. It hurts to do so. Both the sinner and the one who has to confront and mete out discipline consequences both get hurt. But only then can healing and restoration truly mend the relationships that have been violated. This is a thing that a lot of people don't think about. No, we just think of the hurt of being addressed with the truth. Yeah, we think of being hurt because we don't like the truth to hit us in the face. But we don't realize that the healing and restoration don't happen. Healing and restoration don't happen when we don't face up to the painful truth. When sin is ignored, it will bring greater pain and other consequences than if it is dealt with immediately. Okay, let me see that. When sin is ignored, it will bring greater pain and other consequences than if it is dealt with immediately. That's to say, nip it in the bud before it becomes a terrible monster. Yeah. So why we cannot resolve a lot of painful issues is because we never dealt with them when they were buds. BUDS. When they were still in the baby stage, we never addressed them. So by the time we see them as monsters, we just cannot control them anymore because they're too big. In all Israel, we find that there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance. Okay, so the Bible actually goes into showing us some insights into Absalom. You know, while he's going through the pain of being alienated from his brother, his father, this passage actually shows how blessed he was. He was a prince. He was very attractive outwardly, and there was no blemish just now, flawless. Physically, he was flawless. But the passage also indicates his vanity and arrogance. Again, you see, when people are not checked, vanity and arrogance are just very natural weeds, weeds. They are just very natural weeds that grow in the garden of a human life. Yeah. And Absalom paid much attention to the little details of his grooming and was even proud of his hair. Can you imagine he went to weigh his hair? He grows his hair long so that he can weigh it and cut it. And then you say, oh, it's so heavy. Yeah, what a vain person. He was blessed with a good family. He had 3 sons and a beautiful daughter whom he named after his sister, and it probably indicated his pride in his sister and her beauty. You see, so can you imagine that the 2 girls are so beautiful and precious to Absalom, but the name Tamar will now bear a scarring memory. Yeah, the name now will bear a scarring memory. You know, unless we focus only on the good of any lessons we may gain from painful experiences, the name would forever remind him of the tragedy and trauma suffered in life by the sister Tamar when he calls his own daughter Tamar. Yeah, it's a perpetual reminder of that tragedy. So he had 3 daughters, and he had 3 sons and a daughter. And you can see she became a beautiful woman, just like Tamar, the sister, the half sister, no, the blood sister. We have many things to be thankful for in life. Our life may not be as ideal and wonderful as Absalom's outwardly. However, having all the advantages and blessings in life does not necessarily make a person happy or good. You know, you have all the wonderful things in life doesn't make that person a happy or good person necessarily. You see, Amnon was important. He was blessed as firstborn with a great future to be future king, but he turned out badly even though he was first in line. It's up to us to have a grateful outlook for all the things and relationships that we do have so that we can make a happy life instead of hankering for things we may not have or need or want. Okay, instead of hankering for things we want and we need or we don't need, things that we don't need. It's up to each one of us to make our relationships with others work for good and the goal that God wants for us as his children and family members. So basically, Absalom and Ammon were really blessed, but not in the ways that they have made of their own lives. So we see that when Absalom returned, he struggled for 2 years without seeing the father, the king. He had been in physical exile, but when he returned, he continued to be in relationship exile. Yeah, a physical exile became a relationship exile. And it was an extra hard feeling to bear because the father was so close, so nearby. Despite all his outward advantages and blessings, we see that Absalom was lacking in empathy and emotional character. We talk about EQ. EQ is relationship with other people. I wonder whether we have EQ within ourselves. EQ within ourselves. He did not reflect on the seriousness and implication of his own sin. He didn't think that what he committed actually made things difficult for the father. Remember, there could be clan members who were forcing the father, pressurizing the father, who might want to, the clan members might want him dead. Yeah, so he didn't think how it could put his father in a spot. Yeah, and because of the father's love for him, the father might be facing pressure to punish him or not. And Absalom is concerned he did not repent and he did not try to mend fences with the father, right? Did not try to mend fences with the father. And so he just kept to his own bitterness. After receiving no attention for 2 years, he showed a lonely selfishness that had no respect for others or regard for their property. Yeah, he became lonely and he had no respect. He let his selfish nature take drastic action because you see, he tried to get Joab to see him, but Joab refused to come. So he got the servants to burn Joab's field, to force Joab to come. See, it took this drastic matter to finally get Joab to see him. And the thing we see is people do wrong things for the sake of getting attention. No, a lot of children do that. A lot of very young children who are neglected by their parents, who are busy working in big corporate positions. A lot of such children actually grow up very lonely and grow up with not very good emotional character or behavior. It's a sad truth. It's a sad truth that this is so, because rich people should not have to leave their children so alienated from them while they are busy working, making money, so-called for the children. Yeah. So children end up doing wrong things for the sake of getting attention. And it can be more important than whether they do the right thing or not. No, the way to get attention, whether it's through stealing, stealing from shops, shoplifting, or doing more terrible hurts to people and so on. Yeah, it's more important to, all those things are just a way to get attention. Yeah, so it's really sad when people do wrong things so that they can end up getting the attention that they seek. Does this describe you in any way? If you are a parent, do or does your child or children behave in that way? At the same time, it was David's failure as father that he did not communicate with the son. Yeah, so you see a lovely man of God with a tragic family situation. Whatever the reason parents have no time for their children, children find ways to get the attention they need or they crave, including drastic and wrong things. At the same time, being born with a silver spoon in the mouth, that means blessed and rich, is not always a blessing, especially without parental nurture. It can be a handicap in the formation of character if parents do not carefully guide and discipline their child in the ways of the Lord. Okay, so that's a handicap in the character formation. On another point, children without hardship, responsibility, and empathy can develop to be inconsiderate and selfish in action and attitude. Yes, children who don't go through the guidance of knowing how to feel for other people, how to be responsible, and even experiencing a little bit of painful hardship. When people do not have those things, they can be very, very difficult in terms of selfishness and not being able to put themselves in other people's shoes, because they only wear the brand new shoes that are of great value, expensive shoes. They never wear cheap shoes. You know, like the Home Run movie. Don't know any of you know the movie Home Run, where this girl has to wear the broken shoes of the brother to go to school in the afternoon. The brother will wear the broken old shoes in the morning to his school. Then after school, rush back home to pass this broken, dirty shoes to the sister. And the sister will wear the shoes and rush to her school to attend school. So children who don't wear the shoes of other people, torn and dirty shoes, they cannot empathize with other people. Now, parents must pay attention to the outward needs and some of the etiquette. Parents may pay attention to some of these outward things of society, but overlook the internal condition and development of their child's values and character. To Absalom, if he was going to be rejected, he might well have stayed in Geshur or be executed. No, he said, now then, I want to see the king's face. If I'm guilty of anything, let him put me to death. So he would rather die than not see the father's face. You see, in his frustration, he would rather die than be ignored. This is the way angry people feel and talk. Anger and frustration make people say and do what they normally do not and should not do and say. It's most likely that Absalom did not mean it when he said he was willing to die if he was guilty. More likely, he was pointing bitterly to David's failure to deal with Amnon. So in that sense, his father's fault that he is now in this position. He could see that David did not apply the law to punish Amnon. You see, David did not punish Amnon. And now he was indignant that he was being ignored and punished as if he was dead by his unfair father. So David, on the other hand, did not realize the rejection and the anger of the son, because the son was now in the situation so near to the father and yet so far. So near physically, yet so far emotionally. And so finally, Absalom got to see the father because Joab went to tell the king, and on the surface, the relationship was restored. But inwardly, Absalom was not the same. Inwardly, Absalom was not the same. We see the importance of communication. David might love his son, but without communicating this in words, actions, and caring face-to-face attention, his son still felt alienated and rejected. Absalom might be angry with his father, but he did not try to see from his father's perspective how his love struggled with his sin and the discipline he deserved. So he cannot see from the other side. He only saw the anger of his own experience, thinking, and feeling. So maybe we will talk about perspectives next week because the time is up. Okay, it's just a short thing, but I think it's a good thing to think about. All right, so we will end here for this evening and just spend a few moments next week to talk about perspectives. Okay, so shall we close in prayer?
Yes.
I hope this is food for thought for us, you know, as individuals, about ourselves, where we have developed. And also for some of us who might be parents or grandparents, you know, think about some of these things that are real issues, because these are inside us. We can't run away from them, or the emotions and the attitudes and all. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for your love. We thank you, God, that your word is so rich in showing us the windows into our souls. Your word is so full of truths about us as human beings. Thousands of years ago and even today, we are still human beings with the same kinds of struggles because we basically have the same human nature. And we pray, God, that as we look at all these perspectives and all these angles and experiences of people, that we learn lessons for ourselves to be wise and godly people of God, that will work towards the goal that you have for us. We thank you, God, for the possibility of seeing ourselves. And we pray that you will help us to open that window into our hearts, into our lives, into our inner being, to be able to identify what is good for us to deal with, to address, perhaps to heal, perhaps to restore, or perhaps to resolve and get rid of. We give you thanks and praise for all this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.